Okay, welcome back. I'm Rodrigo Torres,
I'm David Straub.
and this is uh, our weekly talk with my Uncle Davy. And today we're going to be talking about the elements and principles of composition, visual composition. And so I have two big stacks of books next to me about this topic. Well, they're books on art and books on photography, and some books cover the what people call the elements and principles of design or composition or art or visual art. Um, and what I've been interested in this topic and how books cover this because they always sort of just cover it as if it was fact, right? So they say the elements are like line, color, texture, but they never give a reference to where did this idea, where, this the source is not cited as to as to where does this list come from. And the issue being that also the lists are different in different books. So some will refer to shape, some will refer to form, some to both. So, and this list is presented as it was just like a fact of the world, like physics, like atoms and molecules, but it's not. These ideas are human ideas, right? And
They also change and evolve over time.
exactly. And so it's always irked me that this is never sourced. Um, and so I've been searching for the source of this idea, and the earliest I think I found the earliest mention of this,
Okay.
and believe it or not, I'm surprised that this isn't more well known, if it's true that it's the earliest, or at least it has to be one of the earliest, is um, Leonardo da Vinci, I believe is the source of this. If you look at older books on art, so before Leonardo, there are some treatises um, that are, and I've set up my camera here to look down on my table so that I can show these. So we
Okay.
have Leon Battista Alberti on painting, and that is 1435. And then we have Vasari on technique, and that's after 1511. And there are some books on some earlier books on architecture, but you don't see the elements referred to. So here in my note, I have Alberti does not offer a list of elements of art, but he does talk about point, line, plane, but in different areas, qualities of plane, light, color. And then there's other things, circumscription, reception of light. So so this idea that there's just the elements of and principles of art does not show up here. Um, in this one, I don't think we have that in Vasari at all. This is basically um, they talked just about, well, not just, but the way that it was categorized was like types of architecture, like the orders
Okay.
of architecture, rustic,
Right.
Doric, forming vaults. So it was more about like what the product that you were creating and not so much abstracting out the elements. So
Descriptive. So it's descriptive
descriptive, exactly.
rather than analytical.
Exactly, yeah, not abstract. And so the earliest that I can find is Leonardo, and he was 1452 to 1519, and he talks about the functions of sight, and that is on page 10. No. Um, um, I don't know where is it 49. So I am not totally prepared to do this. Oh yeah, so here we go. The eye, and so this is very interesting because he divides it up in terms of the eye, which you don't see done after him, or I haven't seen done. Um, so he says light, shade, color, body, shape, position, distance, nearness, motion, and rest. Of these 10 parts of the functions of sight, painting has 7, of which the first is light, then shade, color, shape, position, distance, and nearness. So this is, I think, awesome because he bases these elements not on abstractions, but on the actual what the eye can see. So I love that.
That's kind of being a product of the time he lived in, is it not? He lived in the Renaissance when uh, people were becoming aware of science, say, the birth of science,
Right.
and
Yes.
rationalization of what you're doing. So it's a beginning also of what we would call realistic art.
Very true. And he was very interested in science and
Correct.
mechanics and not just painting. His mind was just amazing, and his notebooks are incredible. Um, so yeah, very much so. He was looking at this, yeah, from a scientific point of view. I agree, and I love that because, and I'm surprised that even though it seems like we kept the elements, we lost sight of the basis of them over time. So, for example, so after him, we, oh, he does talk about, let's see, 15, oops. Yeah, there we go. The science of painting. So very much apropos of what you're
Right.
saying. The principle of the science of painting is the point. Second is the line. Third is the surface. Fourth is the body, which is enclosed by the surface. And this is just what it is to be represented. That is to say, the body which is represented, since in truth the scope of painting does not extend beyond the representation of the solid body or the shape of all the things that are visible. So, yeah, and then point line plane is something that gets taken up later. Um,
So he would welcome and have loved to have photography available to him. That would have been like a shortcut for him to knowledge.
Great point. Absolutely. And in fact, photography has made advances possible in science that weren't possible before photography. So yeah, that's a wonderful uh, counterfactual. What would Leonardo have done if photography was around in his time?
Although I believe he was aware of the camera obscura effect.
Oh, interesting.
He probably used that as a
I wonder
design,
if
helping
he
him with solving his problems of depth perception and design
right.
that were useful, converging lines and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And there was also they divided up the plane um with squares, right? I know that here is the
Right, yeah.
yeah, the kind of the grid that they would put. Yeah, yeah, perspective. Um
But when your father painted paintings, he used to, if they were big paintings, he would do a light blue, I don't know what that was, chalk or something, to make a kind of a grid on the canvas.
oh,
And
interesting.
so you could concentrate on each point and then bring it all together.
Oh, cool. I know he talked about putting down like the medium tone down first so that then you
Uh-huh.
would add the both the darker and the brighter tones later. So you would start from kind of um a medium tone as the background.
Okay.
But I don't remember him dividing that up into a grid. But that's very cool that he did. So um, here's another example um, of this principles. So this is a famous textbook, Art Through the Ages,
Okay.
and it is Helen Gardner.
So when was this written?
This was 1926,
Okay.
and if you see, it starts um, with the prehistoric period in Europe. So in this version of the in this edition of the textbook, there isn't this elements of art piece. So we know it's not something like physics because it would have been mentioned in here, right? So it's not
Right.
until a later edition of the same textbook, and this is revised edition. This is 1936. There's now this preface. Now this introduction, which is missing, which was added between the earlier and the newer. And now there's the visual elements of art expression. And so now we have the yeah, so now we have this whole section on it, which here in the visual arts, one fundamental of understanding lies in a grasp of visual elements, the material itself and the visible evidence of the processes by which it is shaped are inescapable factors: mass, volume, planes or surfaces, space, line, light and dark, color, texture. These are visual elements of construction by means of which the artist builds a composition. So it's not referenced. There's no, actually, there is a
Yeah.
Donald
So
Culross PD here. I, but if you go look, I think I've looked him up and didn't find him referencing it. He just sort of, I think, lists this. Um, let's see what that is. I don't. I wonder if that is glossary appendix. Yeah, okay. So I think it's must be here. Does she have the? Yeah, I don't see it here in the in this bibliography for this section. Rose. Oh, maybe Pearson. Yeah, I don't see it. I'll have to follow up on that, but yeah. Yeah, so, and you see that there, she doesn't reference the eye in the same way that Leonardo talked about these things being based on the eye. So she's talking about the visual elements of construction, but doesn't ground it.
Well, it's like looking at it from a other perspective. It's the same thing of shapes and relation of objects.
Right, right, exactly.
Color thing is the same principle.
Yeah, right. Light, light and dark, color, texture. So the other places where I have traced this is a very early one, and this is Roger Fry, Vision and Design. And this is a book of essays. And this is 1909.
Okay.
And in this essay, he does list, he says, let us now see how the artist passes from the stage of merely gratifying our demand for sensuous order and variety to that where he arouses our emotions. I will call the various methods by which this is affected the emotional. So
Really.
that's interesting because we don't see that
He's
in
dissecting things.
Gardner.
Really.
Yeah, the first element is that of the rhythm of the line, which the forms are delineated. So that's interesting because she has line, but he has rhythm of the line. The drawn line is the record of a gesture, and that gesture is modified by the artist's feeling, which is thus communicated to us directly. So he's tying that to how we are perceiving the feeling through these elements. The second element is mass, where an object is so represented that we recognize it as having inertia. We feel its power of resistance movement or communicating its own movement to other bodies, and our imaginative reaction to such an image is governed by experience of mass in actual life. And I think we see that in photography, the sense of mass that you get from a picture.
Okay. Yeah. So these are all very 20th century constructs here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. The third
But there was
element
no,
is
my question is there is no like medieval art manual of the time that talks about the theory of what makes a good medieval painting, or for that matter, like an Egyptian painting or whatever. Uh, that it's a different set of rules they're establishing, and this whole movement is saying there are rules that you follow to get a desired result.
right. Yeah, I have not found a medieval reference to these what are presented as just statements of fact that there's line, color, mass, body. Leonardo grounds it in vision. Fry grounds it in emotion, and the way that they're presented nowadays are just sort of as, like I said, just like principles that are as self-evident as
Immutable, would you say?
immune. Yeah. Although it's interesting because everybody calls them has a slightly different list and calls them slightly different things. For example, he speaks about space, which is so this is the same size square on two pieces of paper can be made very simple means can be made by very simple means to appear to represent either a cube 2 or 3 inches high or a cube of hundreds of feet. And our reaction to it is proportionately changed. So yeah, this is about how we are reacting to what we're seeing. There is so that's 1909. That's going back. There is another very early one is this early book on composition. And this is a reprint of it.
Was the 13th edition, so it must be
Yeah. So he was 1857 to 1922, and this was first published in 1899. So this is earlier than the Roger Fry list. And so he has three elements. So we've seen different lists. This one only has 3, and he calls light and dark notan, which I believe is a Japanese term for light and dark. So, and he has ways of creating harmony here. But yeah, notan. So let's see how he describes these. This is a very long scholarly introduction on this historical book. And let's see, Arthur Wesley Dow. So he opens right up with it, and he calls line the chief element of beauty in architecture, sculpture, metalwork, etching, line design, and line drawings. Notan, the chief element in illustration, charcoal drawing, mezzotint, oriental ink painting, and architectural light and shade, and color. So, and then for Notan, he has numbers 5. So if we look at number 5, I think this is number 5. This is light, I guess, light and dark. Yeah. And then we have the Bauhaus movement, design and form. And so his by Itten, and his list is different also. So he has here point, line, plane, volume, large, small, high, low, thick, thin, broad, narrow, transparent, opaque. That's interesting. We don't see that in other places. Smooth, rough. That's texture. I guess transparent, opaque would be texture.
color notan.
Yeah, light and dark. Yeah, light, dark is notan. Yeah. Rest and motion, much, little. I like this list because it has the figures next to it, kind of explaining what he means by this. So yeah, so this is a famous course, and I like also Wucius Wang Principles of Two-Dimensional Design. where this is more about repetition, structure. So again, kind of a slightly different listing and kind of including something like repetition. Anyway, like I said, I have a whole stack of books here. I could go on, but I think we should move to the actually, let me see one thing.
There's a pile of books.
Yeah. Oh, actually, so this is an interesting book. So this is looking at art theory, and in here I did find a treatise on the art of painting, 1584. So that's still, I guess, Renaissance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, proportion, motion, color, light, perspective, composition, form. So yeah, this was in my search for where did this originate. So now let's move to photography, and we see very similar elements in books on photography. So this is, and I don't have these by age, uh, by time period. This is The Joy of Photography. This is, when is this? Oh, Eastman Kodak. Interesting. So this is 1979. And we have identifying the elements of a good photograph: shape, line, pattern, texture, size, and space. Capturing the decisive moment. So
Yeah.
that's something we've spoken about.
Right. Cartier-Bresson, what was his catchphrase?
Ah, Cartier-Bresson. We'll have to talk about him.
Henri. Yeah.
Henri. So let's look at, well, let's look at what it says at capture the decisive moment. Oh yeah, there he is. The leading advocate of this approach is the noted French photojournalist Henri Cartier-Bresson. In the two pictures shown at the right, he captures the proud expression of a boy bearing wine and the intrepid daring of a puddle jumper, suspended in midair only an instant before his inevitable splash. Nice. Yeah, that is definitely a moment there. And this reminds me of what is it? The bicycle thief movie, right? With
Okay, yeah.
the boy and his dad. Um,
And
for some
Victoria
for
just
some reason. Um, okay, so freeze action, record movement, serenity of endless time. So here we have shapes, the basic outline of an object, whether the bare branches of a lone tree or the slender neck and fan wings of a swan. So that reminds me of your pictures of the light of trees with light behind them.
uh-huh. Okay.
And then we have lines of direction and distance. So we have the perspective, the lines of perspective here. This looks like the Golden Gate Bridge. Definitely going to the vanishing point. And we have lines of action and force. So this picture reminded me of that sort of talking about the mass of an object and how that comes across. And we'll obviously hear the force of the energy
Right.
that's going being going into this exploding building, and talk about capturing a decisive moment there.
Oops.
Yeah. And then rhythm and patterns. Speaking of which, that reminds me of a postcard that you sent me. The most recent postcard you sent me was a very interesting pattern picture with a rhythm of pattern.
Okay.
I have it up on my fridge.
They're more about feelings than documentation.
Ah,
Some photographs gives you more information. Like the one on the line of British soldiers there gives you a lot of information besides being a pattern of light and dark color.
mm, mm-hmm. Are you talking about the content of
Yeah,
the
that's a yeah. And these pictures are more important as patterns than as information.
right? Yeah.
The
One similar,
feel rather than the actual. So it's like going beyond Da Vinci.
right. Yeah, not just what we are, not just what we see with the eye, but how our mind makes patterns
Right.
out of what we're seeing. And um, it's very interesting to me that they talk about rhythm, because rhythm, I think of rhythm in music as being a pattern over time. So I don't think of rhythm in a static picture. But I guess it's a type of rhythm.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, this is how they're referring to it, and how Fry also referred to the rhythm. I think that is, yeah, patterns. Oh, texture. So then the other, this one is texture. Yeah.
Uh,
Texture adds a strong sense of realism to photographs. Size and space.
yeah, scale is very important. As you can see in that picture on the left there, if it didn't have the characters standing there, you have no idea
Right.
how big this is.
Right.
It would just be a pure pattern.
Right. And we have the kind of two boulder shaped objects here, this one
Mhm.
and this one. And on the page, they take up roughly the same space, is the same,
Right.
but this one, you get the sense that this is
Different.
enormous. Yeah. And this one you can tell is in comparison to this, looks like a Roman temple. Yeah. And so this one puts it all together: shape, line, pattern, texture, scale, form. And I like this one because it does, you can see very clearly the different elements, the
Right.
lines, the pattern, the texture, the scale, and the forms. Yeah, so that is the joy of photography. I have also Fenninger, the
Oh,
creative
Andreas
photographer.
Flanagan. Yeah,
Sorry, what was that?
Andreas Flanagan.
Oh, right. And here, this is 1955. He does have a section called the picture, and in it, the symbols of photography. And he breaks it down into light. And quite a number of items here. So if we look at this page 210, it's interesting because he talks about photographic control. I don't know, I'm not sure what he means by that. Taking a snap is easy. Any box camera owner can take a snapshots and get recognizable pictures. They may admit that a treatise on the technical aspects of photography can have its uses, but books that go beyond this level are often considered unnecessary. This opinion results directly from the idea that photography is no more than a rigid mechanical process of rendition. So this is a different sort of philosophy than we saw
Right.
with what's his name? I forgot. Oh, Daido Moriyama, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Properly controlled. A good, properly controlled picture is one that is sharp and correctly exposed, whereas bad picture is one that is fuzzy and under or overexposed. And I guess he goes,
Kind of judgmental there, huh?
yeah, right. So the principles here that he lists are space. That's interesting, except in stereo photographs.
Do
Stereo
they create
photographs
their
is,
own space? I don't know. What is that?
yeah, I mean, that's what it's giving you a sense of space, right?
Right.
I don't know why that color, except
Well,
in color photographs. Oh, wait, let's see. Oh, I see. This is saying the average photograph cannot truthfully be called a reproduction. So it's saying a photograph doesn't reproduce space unless it is a stereo photograph.
okay.
It doesn't reproduce color except in color photographs.
2 dimensions.
It doesn't represent movement except in motion pictures. And it doesn't represent radiant light except in translumination. That's interesting. And then he talks about every art has its specific medium. That of the photographer is light. It is his most important symbol. It's interesting. He talks about, he calls it symbols, where that's not what I would call a symbol. But here he has, light has four main qualities: brightness, direction, color, contrast. I like this breakdown because I like things to be very organized.
That German blood.
Right. So the four main forms of light: direct light, diffused light, reflected light, filtered light. And then there's, I guess, different types: natural, artificial, continuous, discontinuous, radiant, and four functions. It illuminates, it symbolizes volume and depth. I don't think it symbolizes that. I think it shows volume and depth, or it reveals it. It's interesting use of symbolize. It sets the mood of the picture and it creates designs in light and dark. Well, I think the bottom one is the most important one, right? what do you think about all of this in terms of your experience of photography?
Well, I'm thinking about a problem that I set for myself this week and haven't quite figured out how to do it. It's been very cold here in New York. Today's the first day it's been above freezing in a couple of weeks. And I went out this last week trying to take pictures that illustrate what made you feel cold.
Oh, interesting.
But I haven't really been able to
Oh,
narrow down
wow.
what my parameters are. How do I do that?
Oh, that's fascinating.
I should, by following all his rules, be able to.
Right. Nobody tells you how to make you feel cold following these rules.
Right, right. It's
Yeah, that's interesting.
of an
So,
element. Yeah.
so, and do you see conveying the idea of being cold like a photograph of somebody with a very warm jacket, the same as having the viewer feel cold?
I haven't figured out. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, I wonder if it would light have to do with it? If it was of a brightly exposed picture, might that make you feel colder
Eh,
than a darker picture?
not necessarily.
Right.
No, no, it could be a hot.
Yeah.
You might, think about that.
How
It's
about
always
how
it's color. It's
color? Yeah, how about like blue versus
light.
red?
That would be a warm color, as they say, and towards blue would be a colder color.
Colder, yeah.
So a picture of an ice cube or
Right.
icicle hanging
Right,
down.
right, right. That's the content that's saying cold. Yeah. I wonder if any of these books talk about temperature. I doubt it, but it would be interesting to look. Texture. No, no temperature there. Yeah, so the I I have this book called The Negative by Ansel
Oh,
Adams.
okay.
There's one that's called The Print that I don't have.
Right.
He doesn't talk about um, these elements. So he talks about
Hmm.
light and film exposure, the zone system, which I'm curious about. I know it's very, the zone system is complicated, right?
Not really. It's just a question of basically say what's lightest and darkest and what's in between. How you manipulate the in between your darkest and your lightest.
Mm.
To You can various ways to manipulate that.
So would that apply to like light and dark, no-tan sort of
Yeah,
ideas?
kind of. Yeah, I'd say it's very important with him. He's really known as a black and white photographer
Right,
because the color is less important to him.
right. So if we look for example, we look for line in the index. Yeah, there's no line.
Hmm.
So here we have a incredible photographer talking about photography and not referencing those fundamental elements, right? So
He was very concerned about the final print, about having having just a certain feel that he loved, like that
uh,
picture. Yeah,
yeah,
it's really intricate and you can really see the shadows, details in the shadows,
mm-hmm.
and in the highlights too. They're not
Right.
foreground. So he likes a truly per perfect exposure. Is what he's looking for,
I see.
both in the film and in the print thereof.
Right. Well, and here we see what you've talked about having the background
Hmm.
uh, be in contrast with the foreground, so that the foreground is visible. And it's interesting because this darkness creates this dark triangle here that's exactly behind where this clump of grass is.
Right. He's a brilliant photographer. What can I say?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to get the
He
other
knew
book.
exactly what he was doing.
Right, because he has, I think in this series, he has three books. He has the camera, the negative, and the print. Um, yeah, one, two, and three.
He was
Um,
a great user of large format cameras,
oh,
8 by 10 camera, that kind of thing. He was not as opposed to Cartier-Bresson, was a 35 millimeter man. Ansel Adams is an 8 by 10 man. So you're making
oh,
huge negatives. And these are large or more big contact prints that were flawless. He was seeking perfection.
perfection. I'm assuming that you get a lot more information with the large
Yeah,
print.
oh, sure, it's like a very super resolution, unbelievable resolution on an 8 by 10 piece of film.
Wow, so a lot more detail then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you really smoothness, the smooth transition from dark to light, from shadow to highlight is very important to him. Realized he was not known as a portraitist. I'm sure he
Right.
did take pictures of people, but it's not what he was really interested in. Whereas Cartier-Bresson was interested in human beings in context of some activity or
Mm,
location.
mm. Right. I guess Ansel Adams didn't have to worry about capturing the moment, right? Because it was landscape,
He would want to capture the light
the light, right?
by when he wanted to make his picture. Just this moment, because the light will give me the best possible rendition of all my tones.
Right. Interesting to, the different approaches and different philosophies that
It's a little cold for my taste.
oh, interesting. His style, I mean, is so recognizable though, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, but I just realized what you just said.
Good. What did I
That
say? What did I just say?
that his style is cold.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you were talking about, having taking the pictures outside and having somebody feel cold. Do you
He's
think
emotionally cold,
emotionally cold, not temperature cold?
not temperature cold. No,
Maybe emotionally cold would convey temperature cold.
possibly,
Maybe not.
possibly.
I don't know.
I'll let you know when I figure it out.
Yeah, I would love to. Do you have, so, um, do you, maybe would it make sense to look at some of the things you've tried, or do
Yeah.
you want to wait until you feel like you've
Oh
captured?
no, I definitely showing the progress.
Okay. Yeah, that would be interesting.
I'll get a little batch of those together. We can look at that next time and work in progress.
Wonderful.
My whole life in photography is a work in progress. waiting for that perfect shot.
Nice. So you're also going for perfection then.
Yeah, but if it, define perfection. Something's emotionally satisfying or
Right.
physically satisfying.
Well, what sort of perfect shot are you looking for then?
I'm not quite sure.
Ah, y-
The elusive truth.
right. You'll know it when you see it.
Probably. I hope so.
But then, I mean, then when you get it, then it's all over, right? So maybe it's good
Uh-oh.
to not get
What do I
it.
do then? Take up the cello.
Well, I have lots more books on photographs, but I think this might be a good stopping point for our discussion.
Think so. We have a lot more to discuss. And
We do.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
Pleasure talking with you, Rodrigo.
Oh, always. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now.